I'm going to focus on how to start and run a enterprise product company, because I think that's different than a consumer company, and certainly very different than a retail store or something like that. So I think the first thing that's really important is to figure out what is your product actually going to do and what problem are you trying to solve. I think that's super critical. I'm always surprised by how many entrepreneurs I might meet who are not clearly able to articulate what problem it is that they're trying to solve. And I think a lot of times that need actually comes from some problem you faced yourself in trying to get something done, maybe in your company, or something you've seen some friends trying to struggle with, and so that I think creates a great need for what you're going to do. So I think now in terms of trying to articulate what problem you're trying to solve, it's really important to understand the customer. I would go out and have lots of conversations with potential customers, potential people you think could help you, give advice, but really go and actively talk to those customers. Talk to 50 of them. I mean, don't talk to 2 or 3 and use that as your input. Ask them stupid questions. Really try to understand how they do it today, what you're thinking of. Would it really be compelling? I think it's really important that you spend a lot of time, doing that. And if you think about it, I mean, if you talk to 10 people a week, that's only 5 weeks of work. So it's not really slowing you down a lot, but it's giving you so much more information about whether your area of problem is really going to help, dramatically. So I think that's kind of one thing. The second thing I would do is then, once you start getting a real sense of what you're actually thinking of doing, write it down, whether it's making mock-ups, or maybe you want to make a PowerPoint, or you want, or a Prezi, or you want to write a document, but really try to be able to articulate what it is that problem you're solving. And I think then show that to some friends, because I think a lot of times when you're writing something down, it really helps you clarify in your mind what exactly it is that you're saying, and it makes you be a little bit more, precise. So just in terms of as I was talking about writing it down and talking to a lot of people, when I was starting Komli, I was in the U.S. and I was thinking about starting Komli focused on India. So I actually spent a lot of time on the phone. I mean, from my apartment, I would actually get on the phone and talk to all kinds of people in India about, hey, what was the online advertising market like? What were some of the trends? What did the cost of advertising look like? What were was that going up or was that going down? Who were the big advertisers? And I would go talk to those advertisers on the phone and again, try to understand, how are they spending money? Why are they spending online versus television versus radio? What problems do they have in online? What needs are not getting addressed? So I did many conversations with various people, really trying to understand the industry and try to understand what was going on before I actually said, hey, I think this is an opportunity and I'm going to start, Komli. So I think, you want to talk to tons of potential customers. You want to also really understand the industry. What are the industry dynamics? Is it a growing industry? Is it not a growing industry? Generally, I think it's much easier to start a company in an industry that's growing, because that will kind of rising tide will lift all boats. You want to understand, if you can, what are the profitability dynamics in that industry? How much do other companies make? Maybe there's a business model you have that's similar to somebody else. How much money do they make? Do they have high margins? Do they have low margins? Who are their customers? What does the sales cycle look like? All those things I think are very important to figure out. And I think the other piece that I would mention is getting into the economics of the industry. Like, who makes money in that industry? How do they make money? What kind of margins do they have? Are they growing quickly? Have they been able to list? A lot of times if there's listed companies in that industry, you can actually go and read their public filings and really get a sense of what are they working on from a product perspective? How are their revenues been growing? How much do they spend on sales and marketing? All these things I think really help you formulate, the plan about what it is that your problem you're trying to solve and how you're going to go about it, and how you're potentially better than the competition, and how you're going to solve a customer need. So I think that is a lot of great kind of research work to do. And then, as I said, really write that down so that it's clear what problem you're trying to solve. And then once you have all that and you feel like you have an answer to the problem, then I would go and, again, talk to customers. Maybe you want to make mock-ups about, hey, this is how my product's going to work, and go and test that with 10 different potential customers. And they're going to give you a lot of feedback. And some of them might tell you that, hey, this looks really stupid, or I would never use it, or this part doesn't work right. And that's fine. I mean, the goal is to iterate. Take that feedback, iterate. Don't expect that your first answer is going to be the best answer. Kind of actually expect that your first answer is probably going to be wrong. And I think if you do that, you're more apt to say, I'm listening for the feedback that is wrong so that I can improve it. If you go in thinking you have the best solution and people tell you that you've made a mistake, your first instinct is to tell them that they don't get it, which I think is something I see a lot of entrepreneurs do. I know it's something I've done before, where I have an idea I think is a great idea, and then somebody tells me they don't want to use it, and I don't really listen to them. Like in PubMatic, one of the things that happened was when we first came out with the solution, we were solving a narrower problem for the customer, and they were looking for us to do more things. Like we were just doing ad optimization, but they were saying, hey, I want you to also manage the ad networks for me, and I want you to go and get those relationships. And my first take was to say, well, you should go get those on your own. But if I had listened to that more quickly, I would have realized that, hey, we can actually do a lot more for the customer, and that makes us even more valuable to them, and that will make them pay us actually even more over time. So I think those are a few things that I would do to really figure out and hone the product and the business. Now there's also a couple other things you need to think about. Certainly is registering your company. I mean, you'll get to a certain point where you'll say, hey, look, I'm actually looking at actually doing this idea, so then you want to go register your company. In India, that takes a little while. I think it takes about 20 days. So you want to get that process going. You can find a lawyer who can kind of help you do that. It's not a big deal, but it costs a little bit of money, and it's a process you want to go through. And I think you also want to start thinking about building a team, trying to find some key people who are complementary to you to fill skill areas that maybe you're not as strong at. And then I think last thing I would say is you want to think a little bit about how you're going to finance the company. I mean, maybe you're going to finance it out of your own savings, or maybe you think you don't need a lot of money to get going, which is great. Or maybe you say, hey, actually I need, 5 crores, so I might need to go get some venture capital. But it's just worth thinking through that and maybe writing a little bit of a financial model. It doesn't have to be real complicated, but just sort of how you think revenues will come, how long customers will take to pay, and then how you see expenses scaling over time. I mean, even just 1 or 2 hours in Excel, giving you a really basic business model can help you a long way in figuring out what cash needs you'll have.